Welcome to Thinking Without Borders, and again in the beautiful studios of ACR TV. I'm Hans, and we will be again accompanying you as we take this travel plan. You know, one of the things that we want to do before we go any further is to thank the people that have responded so beautifully to the video that we put out last week, in which we had over 200 hits. And we also say thank you for the kind words that were shared. More importantly, and as important, I should say, the people that have written on YouTube, on the YouTube page, and given their impressions and written and given their commentary, good or bad, we welcome all of them. So we really appreciate it, and I would say let's keep engaging. Today's show, by and large, is being done by people like yourselves, people that had questions, people that have raised certain questions. And the whole project of doing these shows is to begin to engage, is to find ways to better communicate. Because in the very essence of communication, and no communication, or I should say, maybe let's put it this way, all communication are directional. They have a direction. They are either bringing you towards a greater truth, they're either bringing you towards progress, an enlightenment maybe, or it sort of brings you back to a different dimension or a reverse, you know. So we hope that, and that's your determination, we hope that our show can do this. But this is not I show. This is not just a show of one. I can sit here sometimes, as I am today. I don't have anybody that I'm interviewing. We are really engaging with people, and we want the communication to be as horizontal as possible. We want people to be able to sort of get what I say, and then for them to respond. And it doesn't matter if one agrees. This is not about agreeing. This is about searching for answers. We're all in a period of discovery. We're all always searching. Those that have a critical mindset understand that if we're not searching, if we're static, it doesn't help us. So the whole notion of the show, the whole notion of thinking without borders is to be limitless in our pursuit for real truth. So this is pretty much what we're going to be doing today. And we have very, very key points that we have three major themes that I think are very important. The first one comes out of a question that was posed by Lionel Legault in terms of foreign policy. He wanted to say, what is it about? Where is the U.S. foreign policy today? And how does it affect you at home, you that are watching? That's the way we have to look at it. Because it is not just the without, in other words, the outside. It is the within. It is how it affects us here. So the second point we're going to be covering is about Jim Crow, the new Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. And again, this comes out of a question that was posed by Yemi Fatoba, a friend of mine who happens to be Nigerian. And one of the things that he raised is that if everybody's a loser, does it matter that Obama won as opposed to Romney? Or the losers always remain losers? Those are some of the questions that we will embark on, and we will see that as we move forward. And the last point was the breaking news that we have on Haiti. As you can well imagine, that's a very important piece of news that I think it's breaking news. And you're gonna want to listen to it. You're gonna be able to hear it today. And so we have it, and of course, it'll be at the end. So that's some of the things that we're gonna do. But before we do anything, I want you to get a feel, because through the media, we get one type of information. And one thing that we wanted to do was to mix the information that you would get today. Because the aim of this show is really to connect dots. If you're watching mainstream media, by and large, you're watching information that are pretty much control or what you would call half-truths. There are some truths, they can't come in outright lie, but there are other things that are kept. For example, in the situation with James Petraeus, one of the things that you're listening to is the issue of affairs. So that is the number one, that is the priority, that is the salacious news that they're putting out. So what are we doing? We're taking two clips. One from James Colbert with RT News, and the second clip will deal with Ray McGovern which is former CIA for 27 years, you're going to be able to listen to him. So what we're going to do now, we're going to go straight to the clip, and you're going to be listening to James Corbett with RT News.
Over the years, for example, with the Deborah Jean Palfrey D.C. Madam case, where her client list was covered up by her murder or suicide, depending on which side of that debate you come down on, or Elliot Spitzer penning an editorial in the Washington Post and exposing the subprime mortgage crisis, and then being caught up in his own sex scandal literally just hours later after a leak of FBI wiretap information to the New York Times. So the question has to be why this scandal is emerging now. Why is it embroiling General Petraeus, and what information did he have that would potentially have been interesting to the people who would have been interested in bringing him down? And this actually, we can start to see some of the pieces of this puzzle emerging as it becomes clear now that there is the indication that he will not be testifying in upcoming congressional hearings into what happened in Benghazi in September. And because of that, some key information about what happened in Benghazi might not come to light, including some interesting information that just emerged in recently that, in fact, last month, General Petraeus' alleged mistress, this Broadwell, was going around giving speeches about how the CIA annex in Benghazi was being used as a secret prison, which is why it was attacked in September. So there are some very, very big things that are emerging right now, and it looks like the operation to take down Petraeus at this particular moment might be motivated by some of those backdoor political dealings rather than the sex scandal that it's supposedly made out to be.
You know, this congressional investigation that's being done, but it's being done, but his talk was not for the public. It wasn't for the public consumption at all. It's being done, you know, in a covert manner. What's important is we're going to keep looking at what James has to say, because what I'm trying to do is just to post two clips. And I'm not talking about the two clips that you're watching, but from James Corbett to McGovern, which is a former CIA who served the CIA for 27 years. But we're going to go on that further, just down the line. Let's go back to James to see what he has to say, because he gives you a little bit more information as what was taking place in Benghazi that you're not going to hear in the press. And I want you to just listen to it, and you got to bear with me as we go through these clips, because you'll get a lot more information as we go forward. So let's go to another clip now.
And I'm just curious, you say this operation to remove Petraeus, who do you think is behind this? Do you blame the Obama administration, or are there other forces at hand here?
I think it would be too early to speculate on that, and again, it depends how the events play out to see whether or not there will be more information coming out on that. Again, it depends. For example, if he does end up testifying at the Benghazi hearings, it also depends. For example, who is ultimately selected to replace him, and there are some interesting characters in the running for that. John Brennan's name has been thrown around, and he was the CEO of a company called Analysis Inc. back in 2008, when one of the contractors, one of the people working for Analysis Inc. was a contractor for the State Department who accessed President Obama's passport records illegally, and then one of the key witnesses in that case ended up being murdered in cold blood in that case, who got covered up entirely. So there are some interesting connections around some of the people who may be slotted to replace Petraeus.
Okay. Well, of course, Petraeus has made his name for the counterinsurgency strategy in both Iraq and Afghanistan, and I really want to focus on Afghanistan here because, of course, the war, even though it's supposed to be ramping up, is really not. We're seeing casualties all the time there. The situation on the ground is not getting better at all. I'm in fact flying there this evening myself. What do you think this scandal, will this scandal in any way affect the situation there, and are there any implications for Afghanistan?
I don't think there are any immediate ramifications for this because of Petraeus' role as CIA director for the last year and a half. I think that's sort of overshadowed his role there in Afghanistan. But certainly the question of what's going to happen in 2014, whether the ISAF will pull out of Afghanistan as scheduled or not, is still very much up in the air. And again, that I don't think that that's really going to come to a conclusion anytime soon. And I'm not sure exactly how that's going to be affected by Petraeus's resignation. Although certainly the CIA and its implications in the drone strikes in Pakistan play a very key role in what's happening with the entire Afghanistan security situation. So we'll see if a change in leadership at CIA provokes any change whatsoever in the CIA drone strikes.
As you heard the last clip there, the government is extending its drone program in Yemen as well. But the important thing on what you just heard, not only you got some information in terms of the real issue behind this thing, is not about sexual deviances or, extramarital affairs. Secondary, not important. The real issue is, what is his role in the situation in Benghazi? What is his role in terms of Iran? What is his role in other places? But there's another footnote I want you to really watch for, and that is this. Generally, if you look at the military, which is supposed to be pretty much right up front, they carry their wars, usually illegal anyway. They base it on lies because that's the way they do their wars. They have to create false situations to go to war. But the military now, a man coming as a general in the military, and he becomes head of the CIA. And CIA is simply dirty tricks. So nothing legal about the CIA. Everything is to be hidden about the CIA. Comparatively speaking, a person who's conducting a war wants to be upfront. This is why we're doing this, even though it's based on lies. So the blurring of the lines are very important for you to watch for. And we'll move forward with this. Now, I want you to, Ray McGovern, a lot of times brings a lot of interesting points, so that's why I have him here. But I will say this, and this is my personal view. It's very hard to say that I'm going to give all the credence, and I'm putting it out there for you to really get this, to somebody who served the CIA for 27 years, unless he comes out and sort of really trashes it for what it's done around the world. But let's look at what he has to say, because he takes a different angle. And that angle, to me, is a little bit slyish, but he does make some interesting points along the way about who Petraeus really is, as opposed to what he's presented or portrayed in this media, in this mainstream media, which is usually, again, sort of the guy that's running a war, and he's like, he needs to be decorated because he's doing a good job killing people. So let's go forward with this other clip, and we have real news dealing with this issue. And
no, he's not such a man,
J
Paul.
is the one that's
Tell
behind
that
this.
to the widows, the families of the folks over 2,000 who have perished in Afghanistan on a fool's errand. I'm talking U.S. soldiers, not even the NATO soldiers. Tell that to the 4,000 plus that perished in Iraq. Tell that to the 4 million Iraqis that were displaced from that war. Now, we're not talking the ones that were killed. The ones that were killed are estimates between 100,000 and 1 million. We're talking about 2 million internal refugees and 2 million Iraqis outside in the neighborhood.
Now, the thing is, he is a general. He gets ordered to do these things, so
Yeah.
I mean, you can't pin all this on him.
Well, if you look at Afghanistan alone, he kept saying there's progress, there's great progress, but it's fragile and it's reversible. So, if I'm no longer commanding the forces there, it could become reversible, okay? He comes back and heads up the CIA, and then what do you see him doing? Supporting his favorite war in Afghanistan, and even more, trying to gin up more opposition to Iran by creating the kind of intelligence, in quotes, that Dick Cheney and George Tenet used to create. I remember it was just a couple of years ago. He was in Iraq at the time, maybe 5 years ago. And Mike Mullen, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, came and announced to the press, Petraeus has found a whole cache of Iranian-supplied, freshly supplied weaponry right outside Baghdad here. And in just 10 days, he's going to bring out there and show you. Guess what? Nothing happened. They canceled the press conference because there were no Iranian freshly supplied weapons. Petraeus likes to make stuff up, okay? And that's really what you should be doing, either as a general or as the head of the CIA. He's also had other I remember this year when the big worldwide threat briefing was given to Congress by Clapper, who is the Director of National Intelligence, and sitting next to him is Petraeus, and the head of DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency. So Clapper is very careful. To his great credit, he says, Iran has not yet decided to build a nuclear weapon. Well, translate that into layman's terms, Iran is not working on a nuclear weapon. Now, Petraeus, what do you think? Petraeus says, Iran is regarded as an existential threat to Israel. Existential threat, says it 3 times. And then he said, then what we know is he met with the head of Mossad, okay, the Israeli intelligence agency, 10 days before he said those things. And the guy from Mossad, the head of Mossad, said, we don't really consider the Iranians a existential threat. So he's playing to the neocons whose darling he's always been, both on Iraq and Iran. This business about the surge in Iraq, talk about him not failing, well, you know.
This interview was being held by Paul Jay, and again for Real News Network. One thing that you got out of this is that you got a different opinion. Now, the game of really seeking information is the game of connecting dots. You have to connect the dots as many times as you possibly can, because you're listening to a mainstream media that is profoundly based on lies. This is just an infomercial, and now you have to go other places. I've given you 2 spots. James Corbett report, he does very well. He brings a lot of issues to the forefront. Now let's look at Iran before we close this subject, because it's a very lengthy subject which I'm not going to be able to discuss fully here. But the first thing that I'd like to say that Iran has not attacked a country for 250 years, but Iran is the threat. But the United States, for instance, all it does is that you could say that in the United States, it's every 2.5 years or less, pretty much 2.5 to 2 years, they're in a war. That's the country that is pointing the finger. Iran is a threat. President Obama, what does he do? Let's boycott Iran, and so that's what you've seen. But the important thing about foreign policy of the United States is that there is a thinking that you have to create an enemy without. As soon as you create an enemy without, which means outside the borders of the United States, you have to create an enemy within. So the first thing that they do is that, if you know, since the revolution of the Bolshevik Revolution, for the longest time, who was the enemy? It was the communists. The communists is still the enemy, but maybe a little bit lower scale now. They're not on the top line, no longer. The terrorists, the Muslim terrorists, the jihadis, that's the real enemy today. But what's important for you to note is that in 1993, when the first time that the World Trade Centers were hit, they were hit by people that were called the Mujahideens. And the Mujahideens had received $9 billion from the United States. $9 billion from the United States. So you really get the numbers. Those are the people that supposedly did the act of carrying a van aided and supported by the FBI. In other words, gave them the material, gave them the bomb, and as a matter of fact, the informant that was the liaison, when he called the FBI and says, this is a real bomb, the FBI says, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Just do it. So, in fact, that's what you're seeing. The 1993 was really the announcement of who was to become the new enemy. And the new enemy is the terrorists. But there is another question that many people still can't get. You know, listen, I'm not going to be able to give you all of that today, but I want you to understand that everyone here that's watching is a terrorist. We're all potential terrorists. In other words, everything here that's being done is the FISA bill that allows a government to sort of listen to everything we're saying. That's one. You can be everything that's being done. I like Google. I mean, everybody likes Google. They like their Gmails and so on and so forth. But they'll get all their information, everything that we see, everything that we write, that can be sort of transcribed and sent out, well packaged to wherever agencies that need the information. But what are you going to do? We can't live in fear. But what's important to segue into our next point, because I think that makes the point. If you have an enemy without, you need an enemy within. But what these policies are being done, they're being driven by fear. And you have to ask yourself why. Because you're always looking behind your back. Somebody's going to get you. This is the mindset that is created in the society. But inside the country, you need to get another group of people again that we can sort of demonize, criminalize, make sure that they are kept in check. And that's what happens. And so on our very next clips, as we move forward, we're going to look at really Michelle Alexander. And Michelle Alexander deals with the new Jim Crow. So in essence, we are trying to see how do these things work together? You know, or do they work together? Is it how a society is kept glued based on the lies, based on the fears, based on the fact that I got to protect myself against them? You know, those, you know what? And what happens? What kind of a mindset takes place now when you have to represent people that look like them? You know, black males particularly, because that's really the big focus. It's to eliminate the group of people that have the most to win. So you can't eliminate the whole thing, in other words, black men, black women, all of them, but you focus on one because that sort of, it creates an imbalance in the society right away. But I can talk about it, but she explains it very well, and we should go to her, and then I'm going to make some points as we come out of that. This is a pretty long clip, so I want you to bear with me, but I want you to listen in closely to what she's saying, because it will give you a good picture. She will paint a picture for you that will give you an opportunity to see more of what there needs to be seen pertaining to the war on drugs. Again, let me repeat it. It's called the war on drugs. Mark that down. It's never about that. That's what's being told to you. Let's go to the clips.
Had this process of awakening, and there were a number of events, experiences that caused me to reawaken, but one in particular stands out. There was a young man, young African-American man, could be, no more than about 19 years old, who walked into conference room one day. I had been spending the day interviewing victims of racial profiling. We had already filed a lawsuit against the California Highway Patrol challenging their racial profiling practices in drug law enforcement. And we were looking at the possibility of suing other police departments in the area. This was back when it was actually possible to sue for racial profiling. The Supreme Court pretty much eliminated that possibility. But this was back when it was actually possible to do so. And so I spent the day interviewing one person after another. We had set up a hotline for people to call if they believed they were stopped or targeted by the police on the basis of race, and we had received thousands of calls. So I had spent the day interviewing folks who had experienced discrimination, often brutality at the hands of the police, and in walks this young man with a stack of papers. And he had taken detailed notes of a series of police stops that had occurred to him in his neighborhood in Oakland over a period of about 9 months. Detailed notes, time, dates, locations, names of officers, witnesses, who was present. I thought, my God, this is a dream. You don't get plaintiffs like this very often who can give you names of officers, dates, times, locations, witnesses, the whole nine. He was smart, well-spoken. I thought, he's a dream plaintiff. I kept telling him, I'm so happy. You're finally going to be able to help validate, the stories of others in Oakland. And then he said something that made me think, wait, does he have a felony record? Did he say he had a felony? So I said, did you say you had a felony? And he just goes quiet. And he's like, yeah, I have a felony. I have a drug felony. And I said, I'm so sorry. I immediately started apologizing. We're not going to be able to use you as a named plaintiff. There's no way we can use you, if you have a criminal record. The law enforcement will just argue they should be targeting folks like you. The media will have a field day with you. I'm so sorry. I just kept apologizing. We can't use you. And he says, well, I was framed. I was set up. Officers planted drugs on me, and they beat up my friend. He starts telling me the story about how he'd been framed and drugs had been planted on him, and starts telling me the names of those officers, and I stopped listening. I'm sorry. I cannot take your case. He becomes enraged. he starts yelling at me. He's like, how many of us do you think they are in my neighborhood? Try to go to my neighborhood and find a young black man they haven't gotten to yet. You can't find a young black man who hasn't branded already, who hasn't been gotten to yet. He said, I can't get a job. I'm living at my grandmother's house because I have nowhere to sleep. I can't even get food stamps to feed myself. I can't take care of myself as a man. And I trusted you. I thought you would listen to me. I thought you would hear me. Snatches the papers out of my hand, starts ripping them up, shredding them in front of my face. I can't believe I trusted you. Turns around, walks out, disappears into the elevator. Well, a few months after that, I'm doing a public access television show in his neighborhood. We had been organizing, thousands of people in California to protest then Governor Davis's refusal to sign racial profiling legislation. We were organizing thousands of people for the demonstration. It was a live television show. Show ends, and in he comes, bursts through the doors carrying this dirty potted plant. And he thrusts it in my arms, and he's emotional, saying, I just came to say I'm sorry. I see that you're working out here trying to do something for our people, and I'm sorry. And he says, I snatched this off my grandmother's front porch. I'm still living at her house. I don't have any money for flowers, but here. And he turns around and runs out. I chase after him. He gets in this broke down car and takes off. Well, several months after that, I opened up the newspaper in my office one day, and what's on the front page? The Oakland Riders police scandal is broken. A gang of police officers in Oakland have been riding around, beating suspects up, planting drugs on them, framing them, and who is named as one of the main officers? The officer he had identified to me as having planted drugs on him and beat up his friend. And at that moment, the light bulb went on. He is right. He is right about me, that I am no better than the police, that I was doing to him what the police had done, that I had stopped listening to him the minute he told me he was a felon, that I could no longer hear him or give him an opportunity to tell his story and share his truth the minute he told me he was a felon. And I started asking myself some questions. Why is it we haven't been able to find a single black man in his neighborhood they haven't gotten to yet? He was right about that. We hadn't been able to find a single young black man in his neighborhood who didn't already have some kind of criminal record, who was over the age of 18. So I started asking myself some hard questions, questioning my assumptions about my own work, but also about the criminal justice system. And I found that most of what I believed, and I thought I knew a lot, most of what I believed about the way the criminal justice system operates was not true. It was just sheer myth. Sheer myth. Back then, I thought that rising crime rates were the cause of mass imprisonment. Not true. I thought the drug war was aimed at rooting out violent kingpins. Drug kingpins, violent offenders, drug kingpins. Not true. Not true. Back then, I thought that most illegal drug dealing happened in ghetto communities. Not true. Back then, I thought that black youth were more likely to engage in illegal drug dealing than white youth. Not true. Not true. And I thought that poverty, broken homes, and bad schools explained why so many of our youth were cycling in and out of prisons. And I thought that racial caste was part of our nation's history, not our present. Well, here are a few of the facts that I uncovered in the course of my research that were part of my awakening. More African Americans are under correctional control today, in prison or jail, on probation or parole, than were enslaved in 1850, a decade before the Civil War began.
Well, you were listening, and if you paid attention, I would say this. How do you feel having listened to this clip? Are you angry? It certainly burns, and I've listened to this clip maybe 10 times. Every time I listen to it, it still annoys me. It still bugs me. And I'm going to tell you, I think what happens, this is the process that I call humanization, because we are dehumanized. We become insulated. So we have a fear of really saying, well, let's find out what's going on here. You know, I mean, to me, she says so much, and I really urge you to sort of go on the internet and be able to check out her clip. Just put Michelle Alexander on the new Jim Crow, and you will see all that your eyes and your brains and your experiences will allow you to see. So really what's important in this process, to me, I've always said that, and that's the way I did the radio shows, is to look at a process of socialization, democratization, towards a real process of humanization. Because that's the real consciousness. That's the real awakening. So that we are not dehumanized, that we feel the pain of others. But we do more than just that. We act upon that. We take action against those things. You've listened I mean, I've been listening to, I don't know if you've listened to it, but there's Carl Dix and Cornel West. They talk about stop and frisk. But stop and frisk is only one element. It is sort of one of the gunpowders for that gun. The structure, the whole thing is being done with one major component. It is called the war on drugs. Now, having listened to this, if you're listening to what, are these people the most druggies? Are they the ones that need to be criminalized because they are blacks or Latinos, because they are the ones that have packed the jails? You ask yourself, why is that? But let's connect some dots. Let me give you a few more wars. War on terror, war on drugs, war on cancer. At one point, it was a relationship to cancer and disease was probably number 8. Now cancer is number 1, number 2. War on, what else? On poverty. 2/3 of the world now, since the IMF and the World Bank have gotten in, most people, 2/3 of the world are making $2 or less. So $2. 60% of the world make $2 per day. War on poverty, really well done. War on AIDS is another great name. And what are you seeing? War on AIDS is primarily in countries that have what? Malnutrition. Countries like Haiti, countries like many countries in Africa, the poorest ones are the ones that are inflicted by this war on AIDS. So I'm not going to define them for you. I'm just giving you those big headlines. It's your job to go check out what I mean. And as we move forward on these shows, we will explain and talk about them so you understand that a country that every time they need to do something, it's a war on something. So they have stigmatized your mind. They have polluted your mind. They have created their immorality and they've transferred it to you so that you're always in a war with something, some shit. This is exactly what they're doing. And this is the infusion of their cancer into our minds. So what do? You have to first develop the art, an immune system that has clarity, that has understanding, and that says no to these craps. But you will see what these wars are about. But we can certainly say that the fact that we've already done one with the information that I've given you, maybe it's not conclusive because you need to get more information, and you should. But it's a war on people. It's a war on blacks. It's a war on Latinos. It's a war on poor whites. And this is what it's a war on people. And now we can discover as we move forward what the other wars are about. The war on terror, whatever, just we don't need to repeat ourselves. But that gives you, I need to defend Michelle Alexander too before I move to the next point. She cannot compare herself with the cops. I mean, we have our stigmas. We have a petty bourgeois mindset. We are better than them. Just like the whites talk about them, we talk about them the same way they do. So therefore, we all have our little cushy, our little self-enclosed mindset. And so we need to sort of protect what we have. And what it really speaks volume about is the fact that we are lost in the translation because we're all targets. But much more than that, those people are brothers and sisters, irrespective where they are, economically today, culturally, educationally, they are our brothers and sisters. We are all brothers and sisters, and I mean that of all races. We are one human race, and that's where it's at. So the white guy that may have his issues, that really needs to be educated upon his humanity, we can help them along, white guys, white women. That's beside the point. But we are all one, and we need to understand that the better we can move in this progression of mindset that we're all being attacked to one form or another, and we can maybe change that. So some things to talk about, some things to think about. So we really covered the first two questions, which was Lionel's point, you know, what's foreign policy? We took a look at some of it, some aspect of it. One of the key important point of it is also, it's called the preemptive strikes, which means if I suspect you might be doing something, I need to strike you. You do the same thing in the United States. If I suspect you're thinking about a crime, I need to arrest you. I'm going to go after you. Or if not, I need to criminalize you and then arrest you. So give you the stuff, make you a criminal, and then I come in and I arrest you. So this is the game. Now, it might sound simplistic. It might sound like, is Hans really just, is this true? Can it be? Slowly but surely, as we move forward, we will see more. The last point, ladies and gentlemen, really deals with Haiti. I don't know if everybody heard the news, but the government of Haiti has fallen. It has crashed. It's only being kept by people's minds and people's limits of themselves. The issue is when you have a president, President Martelly, that his son, for the past week now, Haiti Observateur had put the article out. We've had a number of different places that have carried the article. And the article says very clearly that his son is involved in kidnapping, which means kidnapping, drugs, whatever other things. That's what he's number 6. That's what they're calling him. Then he has another member of his family that's number 2 in the kidnapping ring that happens in Haiti, controlled by these gangsters, these mafiosos, you know, these wannabe mafiosos. So pretty much when you have this sort of an enclave for a government, the government has fallen. The only people that are keeping it alive is you. Because you accept these kinds of behaviors and say, well, let me keep asking him to do this. I'll ask him for more of this, or I'll tell him to do this. We need to make more demands. There are no more demands. There's only one. Get out. Tell them to get out. It's finished. It's over. He's embarrassed himself. He's embarrassed the country. And you, along with it, you keep tolerating it. It's over. He has not defended himself for the very first week of this situation. He can't. Even the blunt guy is his buddy. They're all buddies. So these lines are blurred. They've meshed. And guess what? You tolerate it. It is our immorality. It is our lack of vision that gives life to these people. Oh, I got to see if he's going to be able to. No, he's finished. It's over. It's up to you to see it. So this is the breaking news. The government of Haiti has fallen. The Laurent Lamotte Martelly, or Martelly Lamotte, as the Haitians say now, Martelly Gagot, is all done. And it's up to you to see it. So the other point that was made by one last writer that said, what can we do with some of these situations dealing with the United States? And the first thing is always the one word that people use all the time, but to organize. But organize is a very general theme, very general word. Organize, organize, organize. It's essential. But what's essential is people in the communities need to sort of begin to fend for themselves. What's happening right now in New York City, in the outskirts of Staten Island, in the outskirts of the Rockaways, all the way up to Long Island and Breezy Point, gives you a good indication. If you're not learning the lessons of Katrina, they will revisit you over and over and over again. Today, FEMA has been giving gas all over the place to first responders and also some members of the population, the civilian population. There's no question about it. The people in the Rockaways need help. They need shelter. They need blankets. They need a bunch of stuff. These communities must get together. We've seen Occupy Wall Street people working on this. We've seen people for the organization People Power Movement have worked on this. Other organizations are working on this. A lot of people have dedicated their time. Everybody needs to understand, if you're living in a community and you are detached from your own reality. And that's a big question for us because we live in communities that are very diverse, in which we've institutionalized ourselves into a one unit. And these units need to be able to sort of mesh, discuss, work together, because the crisis that we just saw in New York City may be a crisis that we will see reoccurring over and over again. If it does, you better be prepared. And the preparative steps is to become acquainted to the person that's in the next apartment, to get acquainted to the people that's in the next house, get acquainted with people's needs so that you understand yours through others. Let's work together. We need to work together. We need to sort of move towards a different paradigm. The paradigm of competition is over. We need to collaborate. We need to work as units, as people that are not unit of one, but a collective unit. And I hope that today, if anything, we've shaken the trees a little bit, but bear with me because we're going to be looking at some of these issues in depth. It's going to be up to you to do your research. I can't and I will not bring you all the answers. It's not my job. I can only bring you some information. It is for us to experience it. So again, ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to Thinking Without Borders. And again, in the studios of ACR TV.